After studying this module, we shall be able to know about the concept of attitude, learn about components of attitude, identify the various types of job attitude, evaluate the importance of job attitude, and analyze the relationship between attitude and behavior. Attitudes can be referred to as an expression of favorable or unfavorable feelings of an individual communicated through evaluative statements regarding the attitude object, that is, people, place, organization, or events, etc. Attitudes could be complex phenomena, although it is communicated through simple words and statements. Deciphering the logic behind the statement seems to be complex. That is, different people may have different attitudes towards the governance in India or perhaps the culture of their organization. However, what is complex is the understanding and the raison d'etre of those attitudes. The attitudes can be mastered by understanding the fundamentals of attitudes. Let us now move on to the components of attitudes. Attitudes have been conceptualized and then classified as having three components. The cognitive or intellectual component of an attitude explains the belief of the employee towards a state of affair in her or his organization. The cognitive component leads the employee to the next component, that is, affective component, which deals with the emotions of the individual and is revealed through statements echoed by the concerned affective component, which is followed up by the behavioral component, which determines the action and the extent thereof. Behavioral component is the intent of an individual to behave in a particular manner towards the attitude object.
If an employee believes that corruption is the root cause of the problems in his or her organization, it can be regarded as cognitive and intelligent component of his attitude. The statement of corruption explains the belief of the employees towards the state of affairs in his organization. The cognitive component leads to the employee to the next component, which is the affective component, which deals with the emotions of the individual and is revealed through statements echoed by the concerned person. In case of an employee, it could be, I am deeply disappointed from the finance department and they simply don't move a file without getting their extra bucks in their pockets. It can be seen that the employee is venting his ire on the finance department for corrupting the organization. The affective component is followed by the behavioral complement, which determines the action and the extent thereof. Behavioral component is the intent of an individual to behave in a particular manner towards the attitude component. In this case, if an employee contemplates to leave the organization which he feels is corrupt and is proving to be detrimental to his career and life, then this intention is to leave the organization is to form a behavioral component of his attitude. The complexity of understanding an attitude of an individual can be deciphered through the aid of these components, namely cognitive, affective, and behavioral components of attitude. In the same, it needs to be emphasized that the cognition and the affective, therefore, are almost inseparable and go together. That is, if an employee feels that he or she is being treated with a bias and by his or her superior, then she will state and dislike the superior. It can be assessed that there is a cognition and the effect of what something intertwined with each other. The components follow the conception of chronological that cognition causes. Effect which individually shows up in the behavior of an individual. However, all the three components are related to encompass each other and are seldom inseparable. The importance of attitude in an organization can be credited to the behavioral component it leads to. It is significant for organizations to understand the cognition of the employees in order to decipher the behavior showcased. For example, if an employee is rarely distracted while performing the job entrusted, the job in which he is engaged, and consequently, it is less likely that the employee will leave the organization. This is the larger implications of an organization as the organizations are making an effort to understand the cognition of an employee does well to curb the turnover.
Relationship between attitude and behavior. People tend to have a consistency or alignment between the attitude they portray and the behavior they showcase. Even if there is an inconsistency which is developed due to one reason or another, the person tries to match up the attitude and behavior. This signifies that in order to showcase their attitudes and behavior to be logical, consistent, and rational, the individuals try to bring together their conflicting attitudes and align them with their behavior.
People tend to have a consistency or alignment between attitude and portray their behavior they showcase. Even if there are inconsistencies which develop due to one reason or the other, the person tries to match up attitude with behavior. Linkages between attitude and behavior have been researched and studied before. The cognitive dissonance theory proposed by Fasinger in 1950s substantiates that there have been some inconsistencies or incompatibilities between two or more attitudes or just between attitudes and behaviors. This inconsistency is troublesome to the individual and he or she will always try to ward off or discord so that every looks rational and consistent. Individuals tend to move towards an equilibrium state where attitudes and behavior are consistent and there is less of discord. Fasinger also mentions in the same vein that there may not be a perfect state and some amount of discord will always remain. Even after knowing that smoking is injurious to health, persons smoke nevertheless, or parents advising the children to avoid rough driving, even though they themselves indulge in rough driving. Tackling such discords and minimizing them can be done in three ways as proposed by Fasinger. First, gauging the importance of the factors which are created discords. Second, assessing the degree of control the individual thinks he or she has on the factors creating the discord. Incentives of acknowledging discord or dissonance. There could be some organizational level consequences for the theory of cognitive dissonance. For instance, if an employees find a mismatch between their attitude at work, role and behavior and trust, the employees would do well to reduce such dissonance by employing a moderate factor. Importance of choice and incentives. The employees may also try to align their own attitude with the intellect of what ought to be done to the work rule. The relationship between attitude and behavior have been studied, experimented on different populations. And there is a common ground theory which substantiates that attitudes do not predict behavior, in short as well as in the long run. It goes without saying that employees would definitely like to work on a job with more zeal or vigor if the job appeals to the employee. Attitude of loving a particular job or a particular type of job.
The linkage between attitudes and behavior have been researched and studied before. The cognitive dissonance theory proposed by Leon Fastinger substantiates that there could be some inconsistencies or incompatibilities also between two or more attitudes, or just between attitudes and behavior. Individuals tend to move towards equilibrium state where attitudes and behavior are consistent and there is very little discord. Fastinger also mentions that there may not be a perfect state and that some amount of discord remains. For example, even after knowing that smoking is injurious to health, the person smokes nevertheless. Tackling such discords and minimizing them can be done in three ways as proposed by Fastinger: gauging the importance of the factors which are creating discord, assessing the degree of control the individual thinks she or he has on the factors creating discord, incentives of acknowledging the discord or dissonance. The three propositions can be explained with the help of an example. Firstly, gauging the importance of the factors which are creating discord. For example, it can be considered that an individual is very particular about using only those products which are green, that is, environment friendly. Now it so happens that after a while he discovers that the product, say a car, is not environment friendly at all and that he has been duped. But now he cannot buy another car as he is already into debt. In this situation, the person is in a state of dilemma and has some options before him. He has to do things in order to minimize the evident conflict between the attitude and behavior. He can change his behavior, that is, stop using the car altogether. The second option can be to try and reduce the dissonance by concluding that using the car is not so important and just one car not being environment friendly could do very minimal damage to the environment at large. Thirdly, the person can change his attitude that there is nothing wrong with polluting the environment with a polluting car. Secondly, the assessment of the degree of control which the individual thinks that she or he can exert in a given situation. So the individual thinks that the dissonance is caused due to something over which she has no absolute control, then there is less likely chance of attitude change. For instance, if in the above example the car is allotted to the individual for office use and that it is the company policy to provide such cars which are not environment friendly to the employees. In this particular case, the employee has no say whatsoever in deciding the type of car he or she is going to use in the course of catering to official duties, and thus the dissonance could be easily justified. Thirdly, the extent to which the individuals are enthused to reduce discord also depends on the incentives or rewards as influencers. The friction which is intrinsic in the discord is often reduced by high incentives on offer. The individual will find himself being more consistent when the incentives are provided and reduce the dissonance arising out of mismatched attitude and behavior. There could be some organizational level consequences for the theory of cognitive dissonance. For instance, if the employees find a mismatch between their attitude on a work role and the behavior, task entrusted, the employees would do well to reduce such dissonance by employing the moderating factors, that is, importance, choice, and incentive. The employee may also try to align their own attitude with the intellect of what they ought to do in a work role. Types of job attitude. An individual could have numerous attitudes, but it is imperative here to discuss those job related attitudes or simply job attitudes which have a bearing on the organization behavior or OB. These job attitudes measure the assessment of the work by the employees. This assessment could be positive or negative, and some of the most researched job attitudes in the OB field are job satisfaction, job involvement, and organizational commitment. However, there are recent exciting developments in the OB field which also talk about employee engagement. Job satisfaction. Job satisfaction describes how content an individual is with his or her job. The happier people are within their job, the more satisfied they are said to be. Job satisfaction thereby refers to the positive and negative feelings and attitudes we hold about our job. The feelings of an individual towards her or his job are often related to how satisfied or dissatisfied she or he is with the job entrusted to them. To understand the concept of job satisfaction, we must first understand the facets of a job. A job is not just fulfilling the job description and specification, it is also related to the relationship with co workers and superiors. Job also constitutes the adhering to the rules of the organization and also meeting the performance benchmarks. These facets are basically the vital job elements which are discrete, and for an employee to be satisfied in the job, she or he needs to be satisfied in all the job elements. Job involvement. Job involvement is also regarded as one of the essential job attitudes which are observed in workplaces. Job involvement is defined as the degree to which a person is identified psychologically with his work or the importance of work to his self image. The relationship which an employee shares with her or his job is the main focus of job involvement. The other constituents include the feeling which an employee has about the work role he has been entrusted with, and also the importance which they give to their performance in terms of their own self worth. Organizational commitment. Organizational commitment can be defined as the extent to which an individual relates with an organization and is dedicated and committed to its goals and objectives. Commitment is regarded as a psychological state of attachment or binding force between an individual and the organization. There is a difference between job involvement and organizational commitment. While job involvement is relating to and identifying with the job entrusted, organizational commitment is related to and encompasses one's employing organization. There are three types of organizational commitment: affective, normative, and continuance commitment. Affective commitment is related to the emotional attachment and belief of an employee towards her or his organization. Normative commitment refers to the ethical and moral responsibility and or obligation of an employee to stay put in the organization. Continuance commitment is the economic value perceived in a situation when an employee stays in the organization rather than leaving the organization. Hence, the perception of the employee is that the organization is paying well and leaving the organization would be detrimental for the employee and her or his family. Employee engagement. A very new job attitude, which is in the fore these days, is employee engagement. Employee engagement can be defined as the synergy of being holistic, energetic, spiritual, and aligned with meaningfulness. Kahn's conceptualization of engagement as being manifested by three dimensions is also consistent with the theoretical tripartite definition of attitudes, which have been categorized as comprising of emotional, cognitive, and behavioral components. Engagement can also be defined as the individual's involvement with, satisfaction with, and enthusiasm for the work they do. Measuring job attitude. Why are organizations required to measure the job attitude, and what specific benefits will it garner? The answer lies in the control aspect of management. If the managers are well aware of the job attitude, it would surely help them in ascertaining the employee behavior. Having deciphered the behavior of the employees, the organizations would do well to improve the working conditions. The managers get all the important feedbacks on the working conditions, employee perception of the job and the organization, fairness and objectivity of the organizational policy perceived by the employees, the supportive supervisory relations, and so on.
It takes us to the crucial question of measurement of these job attitudes. Why do organizations require to measure job attitude, and what specific advantages do they garner? The answer to why measurement of the attitude is required lies in the control aspect of management. If the managers as well are aware of the job attitude, it would surely help in ascertaining the employee behavior. Having deciphered the behavior of the employee, the organizations would do well to improve the working conditions. The managers get the all important feedbacks on the working conditions, employees' perceptions of the job in the organization, fairness and objectivity of organizational policy perceived by the employee, the supportive supervisors, relationships, and so on and so forth. The measurement of job attitudes is generally carried out with the help of attitude surveys. This is becoming very common these days for organizations to conduct an attitude survey, job satisfaction surveys, employee engagement surveys, etc. The characteristic attitude surveys have a set of statements in the form of questionnaires, and they need to respond to the employees. The responses are earmarked with the rating scale indicating the extent of agreement or disagreement. Some of the examples of an employee engagement survey include: my job allows me to unleash my full potential. My supervisor keeps informed about how employees think and feel about things. I feel that work I do on my job is invaluable. These items are co-constructed that they try to extract the maximum requisite information what the organization requires. Appropriate statistical tools are utilized to analyze these responses, and certain conclusions are drawn related to the employee, the supervisor, the co-worker, the teams, the departments, and the organization as a whole. The measurement of job attitudes at regular intervals helps the manager of the organization to gauge the employee perceptions. If the perceptions are found on the negative, then appropriate steps are warranted to change to the positive perceptions. Negative perceptions generally lead to negative attitudes towards the job and also towards the organization.
Measurement of job attitudes is generally carried out with the aid of the attitude surveys, that is, job satisfaction surveys, employee engagement surveys, etc. The characteristic attitude surveys have a set of statements in the form of questionnaires, and they need to be responded to by the employees. The responses are earmarked with the rating scales indicating the extent of agreement or disagreement. The items are so construed that they try to extract the maximum requisite information that the organization wants. Appropriate statistical tools are utilized to analyze the responses, and certain conclusions are drawn related to the employee, supervisors, co workers, teams, departments, and the organization as a whole. The measurement of job attitudes at regular intervals helps the managers of the organizations to gauge employee perceptions. The importance of understanding, gauging, and subsequently analyzing job attitudes in the organization needs to be appreciated by the managers of organizations. These are serves as a warning signal. Typical distraught and negative job attitudes screened through measurement of the same is a warning signal for the potential and ensuing difficulties for the organization. Leads to satisfaction of employees. The satisfaction and engagement thereof of employees is increasingly being felt across organizations. Satisfied, involved, engaged, and committed employees, for example, exhibit lower rates of attrition, absenteeism, and withdrawal behavior. Increases efficiency. If the employees are trained to focus on the innate parts of the job and are able to find meaningfulness in their work, then they should exhibit positive work attitudes. The managers would also do well if they try to make the work more challenging, enriching, and interesting for their employees by focusing on the job description. Helps in reduction of cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is something which can be managed and controlled by the employees with the aid of the management trust. The employees believe that something which is not in their control are externally imposed on them, and the rewards inherent in that work is significant enough, then the discord is reduced to a great extent.
The importance of understanding, gauging, and subsequently analyzing job attitudes in an organization need to be appreciated by the managers of the organization. Typical distraught and negative job attitudes, screened through the measurement of the same, is a warning signal of the potential and the ensuing difficulties of the organization. The companies and industries now appreciate the importance of employees in an organization. The concept of consumer first is now being replaced by employees first, customer second. The organizations are forcing more and more on the internal customers of the organization, namely the employees. The satisfaction and engagement thereof of employees is increasingly be felt across the organization. In this context, it must be emphasized that satisfied, involved, engaged, and a committed employee, example, exhibit a lower rate of attrition, absenteeism, and withdrawal behavior. Engaged employees perform better in the organization and also exhibit organizational citizenship behavior. It is very obvious that at the top level, management of every organization looks for productive employees. and productivity can be garnered only when the employee exhibits a positive attitude. So, what can managers do to augment the positive attitudes among employees? The recent researches have demonstrated that if an employee is trained to focus on the innate parts of the job and is able to find meaningfulness in their work, then they should exhibit a positive work attitude. The managers would do well if they try to make the work more challenging, enriching, and interesting for the employees by focusing on the job description. The importance of intrinsic rewards do not hold their own state. However, only extrinsic rewards would do less than to make an employee exhibit a positive attitude. Cognitive dissonance is something which can be managed and controlled by the employee with the aid of management trust. The employees believe that something which is not in their control are externally imposed on them, and if the rewards inherent in the work are significant enough, then the discord is reduced to a greater extent.
In this module, we have learnt about the concept of attitude, components of attitude, that is, cognitive, affective, and behavioral, and relationship between attitude and behavior. We have also discussed the types of job attitude, that is, job satisfaction, job involvement, organizational commitment, and employee engagement. We have also discussed the importance of job attitude.
Let us now recapitulate what we have learned in this module. Attitudes can be referred to an expression of favorable or unfavorable feelings of an individual communicated through the evaluative statements regarding the attitude and objects. Attitudes can be classified into three components, namely cognitive, intellectual component, affective component, and behavioral component. When an employee believes corruption is the root cause of the problems of his or her organization, then this can be regarded as the cognitive or intellectual component of attitude. Affective component deals with the emotions of the individual and is revealed through statements echoed by the concerned person. The behavioral component is the intent of an individual to behave in a particular manner towards the attitude objective. The relationship between the attitudes and the behaviors is little complex and couldn't be deciphered in a simple manner. There is a common ground theory which substantiates that attitudes do not predict behavior, and in the short as well as in the long run, there are four types of job attitudes: job satisfaction, job involvement, organizational commitment, and employee engagement. Job satisfaction describes how content an individual is with his or her job. Job involvement is defined as the degree to which a person is identified physiologically with his work or the importance of the work to his self-image. Organizational commitment can be defined as the extent to which an individual relates with an organization and is dedicated or committed to its goals and objectives. Employee engagement can be defined as the synergy between the holistic, energetic, spiritual, and aligned with meaningfulness. The measurement of job attitudes is generally carried out with the aid of attitude surveys. It is becoming very common these days for organizations to conduct attitude surveys, namely job satisfaction surveys, employee engagement surveys.